Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Scarlett O'Hara.
I'm standing about as close as we can get to the site where that turbine used to stand. I want you to imagine 6 students sitting jam-packed in this cluster. Now, I want you to imagine 40 trying to learn math in this room. We have seen a very steady flow of traffic here in Tuscola at the Save More Pharmacy parking lot. But what I learned is they're not quick to answer any questions unless you give them your personal information in return. This group of protesters behind me has been out here for 5 hours, making their voices heard. Right here on South Neal Street near Windsor Road back there is where the suspect's car crashed last night after leading police on a high-speed chase they say began with a report of a shooting. She also said members of the district's crisis team and support staff were available today here on campus for all students who needed them. That fire led to an explosion that took out the roof and overhead door. Only 23% of families responded to the survey. 85% of them echoed what staff members said. After calling the first time and saying I was a reporter, the call was declined.
Hours after that announcement, 24-year-old Tavion Davis was shot and killed near the intersection of Philo Road.
And it took until today to get an answer. Documents I obtained through the Freedom of Information Act show Carter took 8 sick days between October 15th and 28th. That's right around the time we started asking questions. Business was as usual at Monticello's City Council meeting, except for one thing. The police chief was absent again. Then, at the very end of the mayor's report, Larry Stoner slipped in 2 resignation announcements. The first was Alderwoman Tammy Sebens.
And Monticello Police Department Chief John Carter, effective immediately.
After 2 weeks of asking city officials and Carter himself, we finally have an answer. John Carter is no longer Monticello's chief of police.
I would like to thank both of them for their service to our community.
That was the only mention of Carter the entire meeting. So I brought him up to Stoner directly. Can I ask you a couple questions?
I have no comments to make this time.
No comments regarding John Carter?
Yes.
After nearly a decade of service, his sudden departure raises questions. May I ask when he resigned?
It's a personnel issue. I don't have any comments to make.
We still want to know, why did Carter resign? Why was the city quiet when I asked why Lieutenant Terry Jones filled in for him at the last meeting?
Acting Police Chief's report, Terry.
Now we know Terry Jones is the acting chief, but we don't know why it's taken this long to clarify the matter. It started with an anonymous tip that said Carter was asked to step down mid-October and led to 7 Freedom of Information Act requests. In one of them, I asked for any and all communication on publicly or privately owned devices by City Council members Larry Stoner and/or City Administrator Terry Summers discussing John Carter. My request was denied because the FOIA officer said no records could be located. I responded Thursday saying, "You mean to tell me there has never been any communication between city officials about the Monticello Police Chief John Carter?" I have not heard back from the FOIA officer.
Anything else, Terry? No, sir.
None of the documents tell us why Carter resigned, but his letter gives us some clues. On November 7th, John Carter said, quote, "While the standard form resignation contract you provided states that it is signed without coercion, it is hard for me to separate my resignation from the pressure I feel from you, pressure that comes after years of no support from you, the mayor." In his resignation letter, Carter goes on to describe how he felt he could never succeed as police chief under the Monticello mayor, Larry Stoner. Carter also said, quote, "Members of the community have told me for years that you openly express your dislike toward me personally." Carter accuses Stoner of going behind his back instead of approaching him directly with concerns. He and Stoner met on October 17th, and 2 days later, Carter says he was asked to sign a resignation contract, but he had 21 days to make a decision, and for 3 weeks, we asked city officials about it. Administrator Terry Summers told us on the 26th the chief of police is still employed, and until now, under the Freedom of Information Act, the city wouldn't share documents regarding his resignation. We reached out to both Summers and Stoner to give their side of the story. Stoner said, quote, "I would like to thank Chief Carter for his 9 years of service to the city of Monticello and wish him much success in his future endeavors." We've reached out to Carter throughout this investigation, and he has not responded.
In his eyes, it's about a conflict between Illinois and federal law. But last night, there was conflict over religion and its place in the city council chamber.
It is in the name of Yeshua, Jesus, the Christ, that we ask these blessings. Amen.
Amen.
When asked whether he believes there is ample separation of church and government in Danville, Mayor Ricky Williams Jr. said absolutely.
I think one of the things you heard repeatedly last night was that there are several Christian aldermen who voted against this, right?
If this were to come back up, I invite my believing council members to remember the way of Jesus. He is the way, the truth, and the life, not through coercion, not through mandate.
That's Ethan Burt, who on his last night as alderman voted against an ordinance targeting abortion, calling it misguided, although well-intentioned.
It took us 4 months to decide whether we could park RVs in your driveway. It's taken us 10 days to get to this point. I think we need a lot more consideration.
Wilson?
No.
Wands?
Yes.
Still, half the council plus the mayor voted to push the ordinance forward. Williams says it started sometime last month after several aldermen requested it.
I vote yes. They had read or heard about ordinances in other communities which enacted similar legislation.
The ordinance was proposed in response to an Indianapolis-based abortion clinic that came across the mayor's radar roughly 8 weeks ago when it made plans to move in.
This is not any kind of comprehensive health for women. This is literally just an abortion clinic.
But for now, nothing changes. An amendment was drafted Sunday and approved during the meeting that says the ordinance wouldn't take effect until a court rules in their favor. The measure won't prevent the clinic from setting up shop, but it could eventually provide a means by which they couldn't perform abortions.
I don't have a stake. I'm not advocating pro-life. I'm not advocating pro-choice. I'm advocating what I see as Illinois law and the defects of the ordinance, which creates a problem with Illinois law.
The city's Corporation Council explained the amendment doesn't protect Danville from getting sued, and neither does the Federal Comstock Act, a law referenced in the ordinance. The Department of Justice issued a December opinion saying the act, quote, does not prohibit the mailing of certain drugs that could be used to perform abortions where the sender lacks the intent that the recipient of the drugs will use them unlawfully.
Advice from the DOJ is not binding legal statute. It's simply that, an opinion and advisory guidance.
He says it could take years before a ruling comes down activating the ordinance, but there's a chance that may never happen.
I think that it's important that we ask these kinds of questions when laws compete with one another. So I don't think it will have been an exercise in vain.
It's been known by admirers in Decatur for more than a century as Powers Mansion, complete with 13 rooms, 7,700 square feet, and an acre of historical significance.
I remember growing up as a little kid, I asked my parents, hey, can we go in to see that house?
Well, it's on the market, and historians like Brett Robertson say they'd be first in line to buy it for a bargain of $130,000. But you can't judge a deal by its sticker price.
If you buy it, you can't go in it till you buy it and that, so it may be in bad shape. We don't know.
That's the problem. Nobody knows, except the current occupants.
Well, I don't know what it looks like now, because there's been a lot of young people living in there.
The listing was posted by County Line Realty, who hasn't answered our calls. Nonprofit History of the Heartland says they've spoken with the realtor, who says anyone who's interested would have to buy the property before checking out the inside, because the people who live there now won't let anyone in.
It's really important that the right owner be found.
Preservationists are hoping for, quote, someone with deep pockets, patience, and a tolerance for risk.
That's our hope, that the home will be restored and maintained, to the level of magnificence that it has had in the past.
Its story goes back to 1910, when the home was built by Charles Powers, member of a prominent Decatur family with even deeper roots in central Illinois business, banking, and farming. It was later bought and renovated by another influential family, the Jarvises.
I think this was the first home in Decatur that had an elevator.
And all these years later, it's still the talk of the town.
The Powers Jarvis Mansion, it plays an important part.
Documents from the county recorder's office show it's been in foreclosure since 2018. The current owners, Anthony and Ronald Grayson, bought the mansion in 2005 for $420,000.
And the prior sale was back in 1988, and they only paid $85,000 for it.
The home has seen its fair share of ups and downs, and although the state of its interior, including a ballroom on the 3rd floor, remains a mystery, historians are waiting for the right buyer to come along and bring it back to its former glory on West Decatur Street.
I'd hate to have to pay the power bills in that mansion.
What we are doing here this evening
is our last chance to fix and control these situations locally.
Vermilion County Board member Kevin Green says the Illinois Department of Human Rights and Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission could get involved if his colleagues don't take action.
These resolutions primarily deal with sexual harassment and financial conflict of interest by current county board members.
He handed out documents claiming Jerry Hawker singled out Animal Control Director Casey Snyder, used aggressive and abusive communications with her to discourage and embarrass her, and that it's the second sexual harassment complaint Human Resources received against him.
Being accused of something, first of all, this is the first time I've seen this complaint.
The report includes resolutions to remove Hawker from committees and reinstitute a standalone personnel committee to ensure fair treatment of employees.
I haven't even read the complaint, but I think that it's sad when a board member, committee chairman, and the committee wants to ask questions of a department head, that all of a sudden it becomes a sexual harassment complaint.
Documents say he was asked to stay away from Snyder after she filed the complaint in December. The final straw was a conversation over the phone accusing Hawker of referring to Snyder as, quote, a little girl or little lady.
I would just like to remind my fellow board member here that liability goes both directions.
The packet includes an email from Snyder to the board chairman asking to know how he planned to handle the matter. During public comment, one woman demanded the board make a change.
So that the public is not to believe that this board condones this type of behavior.